In today's episode of the show, I want to talk about the concepts of self-confidence versus self-compassion, what the difference is, and how you should approach this aspect of mindset so that you can achieve the results that you want, whether that is to lose the stubborn fat around your midsection, whether that is to feel more comfortable in social situations. Maybe you're shying away from those social situations because you don't feel comfortable. You don't feel comfortable in your own skin, in the clothes that you're wearing, things like that. You just feel a little bit not like you're you. So mindset is a really important aspect of this whole thing. And there will be many, many different ways that you can approach mindset. And it's important, I think, to talk about different approaches because one might work for you that won't work for another person and vice versa. So it's important to understand that there are multiple different ways to think about the way that you approach achieving a goal from a mental perspective and then try to test and see and experiment with what works for you. So this is what we're going to be talking about in today's episode of the show. But before we get into that, let me say that if you are on YouTube watching this right now, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel as well. If you are listening to this on a podcast, leave a rating and a review, particularly on iTunes, because that always helps the reach of the show. And as always, in return for your good favor, you will get access to some free shit, whether that is calorie calculators, calorie guides, free training programs, all of that sort of good stuff can be found by clicking the links in the show notes below. But for now, let's get back to today's topic. So when I was thinking about creating this particular episode of the show, I was listening to some audiobooks, listening to some different mindset approaches and trying to pick through the ones that I felt were most relevant to people in a weight loss situation. You know, maybe some ideas and concepts you've heard before, but a different take on them. So that's what we're going to be exploring right now. I've made some notes from those audiobooks and I'm going to refer to these notes as I go through. So one thing that you might have heard about is affirmations, this thing where you're creating these positive sayings that you're chanting to yourself in the bathroom mirror to tell yourself that you are awesome, you are fucking god or goddess and you can fucking do this. Maybe you're doing that every single morning, that is your affirmation. But they might be actually creating the wrong mindset. It might be this one where motivation and positive feeling is being taken too far and potentially you're losing a sense of realism in the whole scenario. So it might be creating this sort of like delusion of what's actually possible. You can say to yourself that you're the most awesome human in the world and you can do this, you can do anything and all of this sort of stuff. But actually, sometimes you need that level of pessimism or you need that level of realism rather than getting carried away with delusions of grandeur. So really the goal might be to team up that ambition with that little bit of pessimism, that realism, that thing that's going to bring you back down to earth and back down to reality. That could be the important ingredient that you might otherwise be missing. Essentially, you're seeking this level of optimism and improvement, but you're also staying grounded at the same time. Now, this for me is where self-compassion might override self-confidence and the affirmation way of looking at things. So instead of focusing always on telling yourself that you're awesome, that you're amazing and all this sort of stuff, then actually focus on not beating yourself up when you're not awesome. Because let's face it, none of us are awesome 24/7. Rarely, including me, rarely are we awesome at any point in the day. So trying to set this bar way up high that everything's going to be perfect, you're awesome, you can do this, you can do anything, etc., etc., etc. It's really not putting you in the real world. And therefore, when you fall foul of that level of awesomeness that you set for yourself, you feel like you failed. You beat yourself up. You think that you're kind of not succeeding. Whereas actually, if you show yourself more empathy, you show yourself more self-compassion, then actually when you do falter, stutter, whatever you want to call it, those things that are always going to happen, you're not going to beat yourself up along the way. You're going to be a lot more positive about that process. And remember, what we're trying to achieve here is a consistent progression towards your goal, not a perfect progression towards your goal. So if the goal is always to be awesome, it's always to be perfect, you're always going to be disappointed at some point along that journey. Whereas if you say, right, well, okay, I'm not expecting myself to be perfect. And when I do stutter, falter, and fail, I'm going to be more self-compassionate. I'm going to empathize with myself. I'm going to pull myself up from the bootstraps. That's where you're potentially going to lead to more consistent effort. And that more consistent effort is going to lead to more progress over the long term. So think about self-compassion as the level-headed approach, the more realistic approach, the more real-world approach that's actually going to work for you. And remember that in terms of applying self-compassion, you might be looking to Instagram for the motivational quotes, the posts that are inspirational, that really mean something to you, that you share into your stories. Share mine while you're at it. And that's the thing that's going to keep that positivity machine going. You might look to coaches. You might look to someone like me. You may even employ me as your coach to help you along the way. And that's all great. It all is part of the process. But always remember, you might be looking to Instagram for inspirational quotes, motivational posts, something that you can share into your stories and share with the world. Why not share mine while you're at it? Now, those things are great. You may even go down the route of getting a coach. You may employ someone like me to help map out your training, your nutrition, help you think about habits, sustainable ways of managing your behaviors and adopting better nutritional habits and things like that. That's all great. But you've got to remember that you are with yourself 24/7. You can get help from a coach or friends, family, support groups, things like that, Instagram, but they might not be with you for more than 5 minutes here, an hour there, an hour a week, whatever it is. They're not going to be with you all the time. So when you stutter, falter, and fail, you are the person who's like first on the scene. You're the first responder. So you've got to have that positivity, because if you're with yourself 24/7, you can't exit yourself. You can't be the one that's having the negative feelings and then you're getting these fleeting moments of inspiration and motivation. You've really got to be the one that's championing your own cause. You've got to be the one that's there on the forefront of it. You're the one that's got to believe that you can make these changes and you can get the things in place and get your life sorted so you are moving in the right direction. And that comes with that self-compassion, that perspective, by saying that you don't have to be Mr. or Mrs. Awesome. You don't have to be perfect 24/7. And you don't have to have such high expectations of every single day of your life. You have to be more realistic. It's great to have ambition. It's great to have lofty goals, but be realistic along the way. If you have a goal of trying to lose, let's say 20 kilos in weight, now, that's maybe an ambitious goal from where you are right now, and that's okay. That's great. That should be well supported. So don't think that every day has to be absolute perfection when it comes to achieving that goal. You've got to be more realistic and be self-compassionate when you feel like this is going to happen over a long period of time. I can't expect myself to be absolutely perfect every single day. So when I do inevitably stutter, falter, fail, I'm going to pick myself up. I'm going to be self-compassionate in that process. So yes, it's just a different perspective. Maybe affirmations work for you, and that's great. If it does work for you, awesome. Keep freaking pumping yourself up in the mirror every single morning and telling the world that you've got your game face on and you're ready to crush it. Go for it. But if maybe that's not you, you feel awkward in that process, maybe it's a case that a self-compassion route where you just really maybe it's through journaling, maybe it's through some form of reflective practice that maybe even you're a meditator, something like that. You just feel differently about the situation. But the essential thing is that you're there on the forefront of this whole thing, making sure that you are the one that's leading the charge for you. So hopefully this episode of the podcast resonated with you in some way. Maybe it struck a chord. If it did, then drop me an Instagram message at iron_paradise_fitness. But for now, all I'm going to say is thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. Keep living the lean life, and I'll see you for the next episode of the show.